The red alert sirens wailed across New Haven Colony. Commander Susan Miller stood on the bridge of the colony ship Defiance, her hands gripping the edge of the tactical display. The screen showed what everyone feared: alien ships surrounding their small settlement on Proxima Centauri b. 15 large vessels had appeared at the edge of their system just hours ago. Now they were closing in. "Status report," Susan said, her voice steady despite the fear building in her chest. "Lieutenant." Alan Wright looked up from his communication station. His face was pale but determined. "No response to our hails. They're blocking all our transmissions to Earth." New Haven was humanity's farthest colony, a symbol of their peaceful expansion into the stars. 3,000 men, women, and children had traveled for years to build a new life here. Now, strange ships with weapons aimed at them threatened everything they had built. "Scan complete," announced Security Chief Greg Foster. "The ships match nothing in our database, but their energy readings suggest weapons far beyond our capabilities." Susan nodded. She had suspected as much. New Haven had only basic defenses: a small fleet of outdated fighters and a planetary shield that was never meant to withstand a real attack. "Time to impact?" she asked. 20 minutes until they're in firing range," Greg replied. Susan made her decision quickly. "Sound the evacuation alarm. Get all civilians to the underground bunkers. Deploy all fighters and prepare the ground defenses." Her orders spread across the colony. Families grabbed emergency bags and rushed toward the underground shelters. Colony. Guards handed out the few weapons they had. Farmers and teachers and engineers prepared to defend their homes. From the observation window, Susan watched their 12 fighters launch. They looked so small against the massive alien ships. She knew it was hopeless, but they had to try. "They're scanning us," Alan reported. Heavy signals across the entire colony. Outside, the alien ships had formed a circle around the planet. They were sleek, with sharp angles and glowing red markings along their hulls. Susan had never seen anything like them. "I've got something," Greg said suddenly. "Intercepted communications between their ships. The translation program is working." "On it." Moments later, the computer displayed the results. "Minimal defenses detected. The humans have no significant military presence. Begin landing operations. Harvest all resources. Biological specimens to be processed according to standard protocols." Thiwa. Blood drained from Susan's face. "They're not here to talk. They're here to strip mine the colony." The first shots came without warning. 3 alien vessels fired on their fighters, destroying 7 in a single volley. On the planetary surface, the shield flared bright blue as it absorbed the first attacks from orbit. "Shield at 60%, Greg reported. "It won't hold for long." Susan watched helplessly as the remaining fighters were picked off one by one. On the tactical display, smaller ships began to launch from the alien vessels, dropships heading for the surface. "They're landing troops," she said. "Greg, get to the surface and coordinate our defenses. Alan, keep trying to break through their jamming. We need to get a message to Earth." As Greg left the bridge, Susan turned to Alan. "What about the colony's emergency beacon? Can we use that?" Alan shook his head. "They're jamming all standard frequencies, even the emergency channels." Susan pounded her fist on the console. "There has to be something we can do." Alan hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There might be a way, but it's not exactly official." "I'm listening. When I was stationed at Earth Command, I found references to something called the Omega Protocol. It was buried in classified files from the old wars, the ones they don't teach us about." Susan frowned. "The Varaxian conflict? That was over a century ago." "Yes. According to what I found, Earth created some kind of last resort communication system. It uses quantum entanglement, not standard transmissions that can be jammed." "And you think it still works after all this time?" Alan shrugged. "I don't know, but I downloaded the activation codes before I left Earth just in case." Susan stared at him. "That's treason, Lieutenant." "Only if I use them without authorization." The ship shuddered as something struck the hull. The lights flickered. "Direct hit," reported the ship's computer. "Hull breach on deck 3. Emergency seals engaged." Susan made her decision. Do it. Send the message. Alan's fingers flew across his console, inputting a long series of codes. The quantum transmitter was built into every major colony ship, hidden in the communications array. If it still works, it should send a signal directly to wherever they're listening. Who is they? Susan asked. Alan looked up, his expression grim. I don't know. The files only referred to them as the Sentinels. The ship rocked again as another hit landed. Warning lights flashed across every console. Shield failure imminent, announced the computer. Planetary defenses at critical levels. Susan opened a channel to the entire colony. All personnel, fall back to defensive positions around the civilian bunkers. This is our last stand. On the tactical display, she watched as the alien dropships landed. Figures began to emerge, tall armored beings moving with frightening speed toward the colony buildings. The message is ready, Alan said. I've included our coordinates and a basic tactical assessment. What else should I add? Susan thought, for a moment. Tell them humanity is in peril. Tell them to wake up. Alan nodded and added the final words to the message. Humanity in peril. Wake them. He pressed the transmit button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft hum filled the bridge as hidden systems activated. A blue light pulsed once beneath the main console, then went dark. Did it work? Susan asked. I think so. But I don't know if anyone's listening. Greg's voice came through the comm system, broken by static. Commander, they've breached the outer perimeter. We can't hold them. Susan squared her shoulders. I'm coming down. Prepare the final defensive line. As she headed for the exit, Alan called after her. What if the message went through? What if help is coming? Susan picked up a rifle from the weapons locker by the door. Then we need to stay alive long enough for it to matter. Outside, the alien ships continued their bombardment. The colony shield flickered and died. Buildings began to collapse under the assault. Fire and smoke filled the air. In the chaos, no one noticed a small pulse of energy from the colony ship's hidden transmitter. The signal traveled instantly across the vast distance between stars, following paths that existed outside normal space. 24 light-years away, in a facility buried deep beneath Earth's surface, a light began to blink on a console that had been dark for 100 years. Something ancient was waking up. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains on Earth, an alarm sounded for the first time in 100 years. In a chamber filled with silent machinery, computer screens lit up one by one. Dust covered everything. The screens, the metal walkways, the rows of sleep pods that lined the walls. Inside one of the pods, General William Carter opened his eyes. The glass cover of his pod slid away with a hiss. Cold air rushed in, making him gasp. His first breath in a century burned his lungs. Omega Protocol activated, announced a calm computer voice. General Carter, please confirm status. William sat up slowly. His body felt strange, stronger than he remembered, but also foreign somehow. He looked down at his hands. They appeared younger than they should be. Status confirmed, he said, his voice hoarse from disuse. What triggered the protocol? Quantum transmission received at 0342 hours. Origin, New Haven Colony, Proxima Centauri system. Message reads, coordinates attached. Basic tactical assessment attached. Humanity in peril. Wake them. William swung his legs over the side of the pod and stood carefully. His muscles worked perfectly despite the long sleep. The medical nanites had done their job, keeping his body from aging or weakening during cryosleep. Show me the tactical data, he ordered. A holographic display appeared in front of him, showing the New Haven colony surrounded by unknown ships. The computer listed estimates of their weapons, shields, and troop numbers. Identification of hostile force? William asked. Comparing to known threat, match found. 92% probability these are Crax warships. William's expression darkened. So, intelligence was right, they did expand into our sector. He walked to a console and pressed his hand against the scanner. Lights throughout the facility began to turn on. The air circulation systems hummed to life, clearing away the stale air. "Begin revival of all Sentinel personnel," he ordered. "Activate the Behemoth fleet." "Acknowledged," replied the computer. "Revival process initiated. Estimated time to full operational status, 3 hours." Throughout the facility, more sleep pods began to open. Men and women in simple gray uniforms sat up, disoriented at first, then focused as their training took over. These were the Sentinels, veterans of humanity's forgotten war who had chosen eternal vigilance over peace. William moved to a locker with his name on it. Inside he found his uniform, black with silver trim, the rank of general displayed on the shoulders. As he dressed, Dr. Olivia Penn entered the command center. She had been the lead scientist for the Behemoth project before entering cryosleep, alongside the military personnel. "The Omega Protocol," she said simply. "After all this time." William nodded. "New Haven colony is under attack by the cracks." "The current government won't know what's happening," Olivia said. "The Sentinel Protocol was classified. Most people think the Behemoths were dismantled after the Varaxian War." "They're about to learn differently," William replied. He activated the main communications array. "Contact United Earth Government, Priority Alpha." In Geneva, Switzerland, the central government complex of United Earth was in chaos. Alarms blared through every corridor. Security personnel rushed to their stations as reports came in of massive energy signatures appearing in orbit. President Laura Davis hurried into the emergency command center, followed by her advisors. The main screen showed 7 enormous objects, appearing seemingly out of nowhere in Earth orbit. "What are they?" she demanded. "How did they get past our early warning systems?" Defense Minister Howard Walsh shook his head in confusion. "Unknown, Madam President. They just appeared. No approach vector, no warp signature." "Are they ships? Weapons platforms?" "They appear to be ships. Massive ones. Larger than anything in our fleet." A communications officer looked up suddenly. "Madam President, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. They're identifying themselves as the United Earth Sentinels." President Davis frowned. "The what?" The main screen changed to show William Carter in his Sentinel uniform. "This is General William Carter of the United Earth Sentinels. I need to speak with whoever is in command immediately." Davis stepped forward. "This is President Laura Davis of the United Earth Government. Identify yourself properly, General. I know every general in our military, and you're not one of them." "Madam President, I don't have time to explain fully. The Sentinel Protocol has been activated in response to an Omega distress call. My authorization codes are being transmitted to you now." A junior officer handed Davis a tablet. She studied it, her expression changing from confusion to shock. "These codes, they have presidential authorization, but they're dated from over a century ago." "That is correct," William replied. "The Sentinels were established after the Varaxian War as humanity's final line of defense. We removed ourselves from society to stand eternal watch. Now we have been awakened because a human colony is under attack." As Davis struggled to process this information, Olivia Penn joined William on the screen. "Madam President, I'm Dr. Olivia Penn. The ships you see are called Behemoths. They were built during the Varaxian War but were never decommissioned. Instead, they were hidden in plain sight, cloaked in Earth orbit or buried on moons and asteroids throughout the solar system." "This is incredible," Davis said. "Why weren't we told about this?" "Need to know basis," William answered. "Only the highest levels of government were aware. The knowledge was passed from one president to the next." Davis looked at her advisors. "Is this true?" Defense Minister Walsh cleared his throat. "There are classified files, Madam President. I was told they contained contingency plans. I never imagined anything like this." "Madam President," William continued, "we don't have time for a full briefing. New Haven colony is under attack by a species known as the Cracks. They're a hostile expansionist empire that views other sentient beings as resources. We need to move quickly if we're going to save those colonists." Davis straightened her shoulders. What do you propose, General? The Behemoth fleet will depart immediately. We request that you inform the public that these are Earth vessels on a rescue mission. We can handle the full explanation when we return. After a moment of thought, Davis nodded. Approved, General. Save our people. Aboard the lead Behemoth, named Retribution, William Carter watched as his crew took their stations. Men and women who had fought in a war most of humanity had forgotten now prepared once again for battle. The ship's AI, Damascus, appeared as a hologram beside him. All systems online, General. The fleet is ready. William looked out at the stars visible through the massive bridge windows. Set course for New Haven Colony. Maximum speed. Throughout the solar system, the 7 Behemoths activated their drive systems, technology far beyond what civilian ships used. Space itself seemed to bend around the massive vessels as they disappeared into the void. The sleeping giants of Earth were awake, and they were angry. Susan Miller crouched behind a fallen wall, her rifle clutched tightly in her hands. All around her, the colony of New Haven burned. Alien troops moved through the streets, their tall armored forms searching buildings and dragging out any humans. They found 3 days had passed since the attack began. 3 days of fighting, retreating, and watching their home be torn apart. The colony's main square, once filled with markets and laughing children, was now a landing zone for enemy dropships. How many clips do you have left? Greg Foster asked, from beside her. The security chief's face was streaked with dirt and blood from a cut above his eye. 2, Susan replied. You? 1.5. He peered around the edge of the wall. They're moving toward the hospital. There are still people inside. Susan nodded grimly. The hospital had been converted into their final stronghold. The main bunkers had been compromised on the second day when the aliens brought in some kind of drilling machine. Now the remaining colonists, barely 500 out of 3,000, were gathered in the reinforced hospital basement. We need to slow them down, she said. Buy more time. Greg checked his weapon. For what? Help isn't coming, Commander. Susan thought of Alan Wright and his strange message sent on the quantum transmitter. He had died yesterday, shot while trying to reach them with supplies. Maybe not, she admitted. But I'm not giving up until I'm dead. Greg managed a tired smile. Fair enough. Let's make these bastards work for it. They moved out, staying low, and using the ruined buildings for cover. 2 more colony guards joined them, Maria Lopez and Ben Rivers, both looking as exhausted as Susan felt. The aliens have some kind of energy weapon they're setting up in the square, Maria reported. Looks like they're planning to blast through the hospital walls. Susan studied the square from their hiding place. She counted at least 30 alien soldiers, cracks, according to their intercepted communications. Their armor was dark red with black markings, and they moved with frightening coordination. We need to take out that weapon, she decided. Maria, you and Ben circle around to the east side. Greg and I will approach from the west. We'll attack simultaneously and create confusion. They split up, moving carefully through the ruins. Susan's heart pounded as she and Greg approached the square. The alien weapon was massive, a cannon-like device being assembled by 4 Cracks engineers. On my mark, Susan whispered into her comm unit. She gripped her last grenade. 3, 2, 1, mark. 4 humans attacked from different directions. Grenades exploded among the surprised aliens. Rifle fire cut down several more before they could react. The Cracks recovered quickly, returning fire with weapons that shot bursts of green energy. Susan ducked as one blast melted the concrete beside her head. She fired at the aliens operating, the cannon hitting one in the joint between armor plates. For a moment it seemed like their attack might succeed. Then more Cracks poured out of a nearby dropship. Susan realized they had walked into a trap. Fall back, she shouted. Fall back to the hospital. Greg was hit as they retreated, a green energy bolt striking his leg. Susan grabbed him, half carrying him as they ran. Maria was nowhere to be seen. Ben provided covering fire until his rifle clicked empty, then drew a pistol. They were almost to the hospital when a Crack soldier stepped out from behind a fallen tree. Its helmet had 4 glowing eye slits that locked onto Susan. It raised its weapon. Ben threw himself in front of Susan and Greg. The green bolt struck him in the chest, burning through him instantly. Susan fired her rifle one-handed, the bullets bouncing off the alien's armor until one found the neck joint. The cracks fell, black fluid leaking from its suit. "Get inside," Susan told Greg, propping him against the hospital door. "I'll hold them off." "Don't be stupid," Greg argued. "You can't fight them alone." "I'm not leaving you out here," she insisted. "Now go." As Greg limped inside, Susan took position behind an overturned medical transport. Her rifle had maybe 15 rounds left. She could see crack soldiers approaching cautiously from 3 directions. This was it, the end of the line. Then the sky lit up. It started as a strange ripple effect, like heat rising from hot pavement. Space itself seemed to tear open above New Haven. Susan looked up, expecting to see more crack ships. Instead, she saw monsters. 7 massive ships emerged from the rupture in space. They were enormous, each one at least 20 times the size of the colony ship Defiance. Their hulls were midnight black with lines of blue energy pulsing along their length. They were shaped like arrowheads, sharp and threatening, with what looked like hundreds of weapon emplacements covering their surfaces. The cracks noticed too. Their advance stopped as soldiers looked upward. Even from the ground, Susan could see the alien ships in orbit beginning to reposition, moving to face the newcomers. A voice boomed from the sky, so loud it seemed to make the air vibrate. It spoke in clear English. "This is General William Carter of the United Earth Sentinels. You have attacked a human colony. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Susan couldn't believe what she was hearing. Earth had sent help? But these ships were like nothing she had ever seen in Earth's defense fleet. The crack soldiers around her began firing upward uselessly, their weapons unable to reach the ships high above. In orbit, the crack's fleet opened fire on the newcomers. What happened next, Susan would struggle to describe later. The massive human ships, if they were indeed human, seemed barely to notice the crack's attacks. Their shields flickered slightly when hit, but showed no signs of strain. Then they responded. Beams of white energy lanced down from the Earth vessels. Each beam struck a crack's ship, slicing through it like it was made of paper. In seconds, half the alien fleet was reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The remaining crack ships attempted to flee, engines flaring as they tried to reach the jump point at the edge of the system. None made it. The Earth ships fired again, and the crack's fleet simply ceased to exist. On the ground, the alien soldiers began to retreat to their dropships. Susan watched in amazement as smaller craft launched from the giant Earth vessels, fighters, and troop transports, hundreds of them descending toward New Haven. The sky filled with the sound of atmospheric engines as the first wave of fighters screamed past overhead. They targeted the crack's dropships, destroying them before they could lift off. Trapped, the alien ground forces scattered. Larger transports landed in the colony's open areas. Doors opened and soldiers emerged, humans in powered armor unlike anything Susan had seen before. They moved with practiced precision, targeting the aliens with weapons that cut through their armor with ease. The hospital door opened behind Susan. Greg limped out, staring at the sky in disbelief. "The message worked," Susan said softly. "Help," came. A particularly large transport landed in the square where the cracks had been setting up their weapon. Its ramp lowered, and a group of soldiers in more ornate armor walked out. One removed his helmet, revealing an older man with short gray hair and determined eyes. He approached Susan directly as if he knew exactly who was in charge. "Commander," he said with a nod, "I'm General William Carter. I received your SOS." Susan stood at attention despite her exhaustion. "Commander Susan Miller, New Haven Colony. Thank you for coming, General. But who are you? Those ships aren't Earth Defense Force." Carter's expression was grim but proud. "No, Commander. We're what comes after the Defense Force fails. We're the Sentinels, and those ships are the Behemoths." Above them, the enormous vessels moved into a protective formation around the planet. Their very presence seemed to declare a simple truth to the universe. Humanity was not to be trifled with. Susan sat in the conference room aboard the Behemoth Retribution, trying not to stare at everything around her. The ship was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with faint blue energy. Displays appeared in midair without any visible projectors. Even the chairs adjusted themselves automatically to each person's body. Across the table, General Carter studied reports on a floating screen. Dr. Olivia Penn sat beside him, occasionally pointing to something in the data. Two other Sentinel officers stood nearby, Colonel Frank Martinez and Major Diane Kelly. "Your colony was lucky," Carter said finally, looking up at Susan. "The cracks usually don't leave survivors." "Lucky?" Susan couldn't keep the anger from her voice. "We lost over 2,000 people." Carter's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Commander. I meant no disrespect to your losses. What I meant was that the cracks typically sterilize planets completely before harvesting resources. Why did they attack us at all?" "We're a peaceful colony," Dr. Penn answered, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact. "The cracks don't see other species as equals. To them, you were just another resource to be harvested. Human bodies contain compounds they consider valuable." Susan felt sick at the thought. "And you knew about these aliens? For how long?" "We've been monitoring them for decades," Carter explained. "The Sentinel Protocol was established after the Varaxian War, but our intelligence network never stopped watching for new threats." Colonel Martinez stepped forward. "The Cracks Empire has expanded through 12 star systems in the past century. They strip planets bare and move on. Your colony was simply the first human settlement they encountered." Susan tried to process this information. "But why didn't Earth warn us? Why build colonies if you knew these things were out there?" "Politics," Carter said simply. "After the Varaxian War, humanity wanted peace. The government classified all information about potential alien threats. They buried the existence of the Behemoths and the Sentinels. Most people today think we're just myths, stories to scare military recruits." "Meanwhile," Major Kelly added, "Earth continued its peaceful expansion, hoping the galaxy was safer than we knew it to be." Susan stood and walked to the viewport. The Retribution hung in orbit above New Haven. Below, she could see the damaged colony and the smaller ships shuttling supplies and medical teams to the surface. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we prepare," Carter replied. "The cracks you encountered was just a scouting force. When they don't report back, they'll send more ships, a lot more." "And you'll fight them?" Carter nodded. "That's why we exist, Commander. The Sentinels stand between humanity and extinction." Susan turned back to face them. "I want to help." "We hoped you'd say that," Dr. Penn said with a small smile. "Your experience with the cracks is valuable, and we need people who understand modern Earth. We've been asleep for a century, after all." For the next few days, Susan split her time between helping the colony rebuild and learning about the Sentinels. The Behemoth ships remained in orbit, their presence both reassuring and frightening to the colonists. Greg Foster was recovering in the Retribution's medical bay. The Sentinel doctors had technology far beyond what Susan had seen before. They had regrown his damaged leg tissue in hours. "You should see their armory," Greg told her when she visited. "Makes our weapons look like toys." "Carter offered me a position," Susan said, "as a liaison between the Sentinels and modern Earth forces." Greg raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to take it?" "I think so. Someone needs to understand what we're really facing out here." 1 week after the Behemoths arrived, sensors detected new energy signatures at the edge of the system. Carter called Susan to the Retribution's bridge. "Cracks reinforcements," he explained, pointing to the tactical display. 23 warships. "This isn't a scouting party, it's an invasion fleet." Susan studied the display. The alien ships were moving slowly, cautiously, clearly aware something had happened to their advance force. "They haven't spotted us yet," Major Kelly reported. "Our stealth systems are still effective." Carter turned to Susan. "Commander, I need your input. We have two options. We can engage them here, or we can fall back to Earth and prepare a larger defense." Susan thought about the colony below. Many buildings were still damaged. The survivors were just beginning to recover. If we fall back, what happens to New Haven? She asked. We evacuate everyone, Carter said. But the colony would be lost, Susan shook her head. These people have already lost too much. They deserve to keep their home. Carter nodded, seemingly pleased with her answer. Colonel Martinez, prepare the fleet for combat. Inform the other behemoths we engage in 1 hour. The bridge became a center of controlled activity. Susan watched in amazement as the Sentinel crew prepared for battle with practiced efficiency. You should see this, Carter said, guiding her to a special observation room off the main bridge. The circular chamber had transparent walls that provided a 360-degree view of space. This is where I come to think, he explained, and to remind myself what we're fighting for. From this vantage point, Susan could see all 7 behemoths moving into formation. They were magnificent and terrifying, each one a city-sized engine of destruction. They were built to fight the Viraxians, Carter said quietly. An enemy far more dangerous than the Cracks. We hoped they would never be needed again. But you kept them ready, Susan observed. Someone had to stand watch. A soft chime sounded, and Damascus, the ship's AI, appeared as a hologram beside them. General, the Cracks fleet has detected us. They are moving to attack position. Carter's expression hardened. So be it. Signal all ships, weapons free. In the distance, Susan could see the Cracks vessels, small compared to the behemoths but still deadly. Green energy began to gather at their weapon ports. They're firing, Damascus reported calmly. The space between the fleets lit up with green energy. Beams. They struck the behemoth's shields, which glowed blue on impact but held firm. Return fire, Carter ordered. All batteries. The behemoths responded with devastating power. White energy beams lanced out, each one finding a Cracks ship. Unlike the first battle, these alien vessels were better protected. They didn't disintegrate immediately, but their shields flared and failed under the assault. They're launching fighters, Damascus reported. Hundreds of small craft poured from the Cracks ships, moving toward the behemoths in attack formation. Launch our fighters, Carter ordered. Defensive pattern alpha. The behemoths opened launch bays. Along their flanks, swarms of human fighters emerged, sleek and deadly. They met the Cracks fighters in the space between the fleets, and a chaotic battle ensued. Susan watched in awe as humanity's full military might was unleashed for the first time in a century. The behemoths moved with surprising grace for such massive vessels, their weapons precisely targeting the Cracks ships. 3 alien vessels exploded in quick succession. The others began to retreat, trying to escape the behemoth's range. They're running, Susan said. Carter shook his head. Not for long. This was just the first wave. The Cracks don't give up easily. As if to prove his point, space rippled at the edge of the system. More Cracks ships appeared, at least 50 of them larger than the first group. The real battle, Carter said grimly, begins now. The battle raged across the Proxima Centauri system. 50 Cracks warships against 7 behemoths. Under normal circumstances, such numbers would mean certain defeat for the smaller force. But the behemoths were far from normal vessels. Susan watched from the observation room as the massive human ships moved with surprising coordination. They fought not as individual vessels, but as parts of a single organism, covering each other's movements and concentrating fire on key targets. They're communicating faster than should be possible, she remarked. Neural link technology, Dr. Penn explained, joining her at the viewport. All Sentinel officers are connected through Damascus and the other ship AIs. They share information and coordinate instantly. The Cracks adapted quickly, changing tactics when their initial assault failed. They split into smaller groups, trying to surround individual behemoths. One particularly large alien vessel, apparently their flagship, stayed back, directing the others. They're smarter than we expected, Carter said as he entered the observation room. This isn't just a resource grab anymore. They've committed their main battle fleet. Susan pointed to the Cracks flagship. What are they waiting for? They're analyzing our capabilities, Carter replied. The Cracks are cruel but not stupid. They're Admiral wants to understand what he's fighting before committing fully. As if to prove his point, a group of 10 crack ships suddenly broke off their attack and jumped away, disappearing in flashes of green light. "Where did they go?" Susan asked. Carter's expression darkened. "Back to their empire, to report what they've found." "Is that bad?" "Very. They now know humans have technology that can challenge them. The next fleet they send will be even larger." The remaining crack ships fought with renewed desperation. 3 behemoths took damage, their shields flickering under concentrated fire. But the outcome was never in doubt. Within hours, the last alien vessel was destroyed, leaving only debris floating in space where the Cracks fleet had been. "Victory," Damascus announced. "All enemy ships neutralized." There was no celebration on the bridge. The Sentinels moved from battle stations to repair and assessment mode with quiet efficiency. "This was just the beginning," Carter told Susan. "The Cracks empire spans dozens of systems. They'll be back." 2 days later, Susan stood in the colony's central plaza, which was being rebuilt by both colonists and Sentinel engineers. The 7 behemoths hung in the sky above, visible even in daylight. To many colonists, they were objects of fear. To others, they represented salvation. Carter had called a meeting of all colony leaders and Sentinel command staff. Everyone gathered in the half-repaired town hall, the largest intact building in New Haven. "The situation is clear," Carter began once everyone was seated. "The Cracks now know of humanity's existence and our defensive capabilities. Intelligence suggests they will return with a much larger force, not just to this colony, but potentially to all human settlements." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Greg Foster, now recovered, leaned toward Susan. "He's scaring people." "They should be scared," Susan whispered back. "I've seen what these aliens do." Carter continued. "United Earth government has been fully briefed on the situation. Their options are limited. Modern Earth ships are no match for Cracks technology." He activated a holographic display showing the known extent of human space, Earth, Mars, Jupiter's moons, and a dozen colonies including New Haven, alongside the estimated territory of the Cracks Empire. The Cracks control at least 50 habitable worlds. Their military is vast. The behemoths were built to fight a defensive war, not lead an assault across multiple star systems. Dr. Penn stepped forward. "We propose a compromise solution. New Haven becomes a fortress world, the first line of defense against the Cracks. We'll station 3 behemoths here permanently and build orbital defense platforms." "And the other behemoths?" asked Mayor John Phillips of New Haven. "Return to Earth to begin production of more defensive systems," Carter replied. "The Sentinel protocol included preserved shipyards throughout the solar system. It's time to reactivate them." Susan saw the fear in the colonists' faces. Their home was being transformed into a military outpost. "What about evacuation?" Someone called out. "Why not just abandon this system?" Carter shook his head. "Running won't help. The Cracks now know where human space begins. If we abandon New Haven, they'll simply follow us deeper into our territory. Better to make our stand here with preparation and planning." The meeting continued for hours, as details were discussed and arguments made. In the end, the decision was barely a decision at all. Staying to fight was their only realistic option. As people filed out, Carter pulled Susan aside. "Commander Miller, I'd like you to take command of New Haven's ground defenses. The colonists trust you, and you've proven your ability in combat." Susan was surprised by the offer. "What about Greg? He was security chief before the attack." "Foster will be your second in command, but you've shown something he hasn't yet, the ability to make impossible decisions under pressure." Susan thought of Alan Wright and the message that had saved them all. She nodded slowly. "I'll do it." 3 months passed. New Haven was transformed. Defensive walls surrounded the rebuilt colony. Weapon emplacements dotted the landscape. Orbital platforms circled the planet, ready to target any hostile ships that might appear. Susan stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed command center, watching as colonists and Sentinel personnel moved through the streets below. Children played in a park while guards in powered armor patrolled nearby. It was a strange mix of civilian life and military preparation. Greg joined her, handing her a cup of coffee. Supply ship arrived from Earth, brought new weapons and 200 volunteers. Volunteers? Susan asked, surprised. Word has spread about the cracks. People are scared, but they're also angry. These volunteers want to fight. Susan sipped her coffee. They have no idea what they're volunteering for. Neither did we, Greg pointed out. But here we are. In orbit, the Behemoth Retribution maintained its silent watch. 2 other Behemoths, Judgment and Defiance, patrolled the outer system, their sensors scanning constantly for any sign of cracks activity. On the Retribution's bridge, Carter stood with Dr. Penn reviewing the latest intelligence reports from Earth. Production has begun on 4 new Behemoths, Penn said. Smaller than these originals, but with updated technology. Will they be ready in time? Carter asked. That depends on when the cracks return. Damascus appeared beside them. General, long-range sensors have detected unusual activity at the edge of the system, possible space-time distortions consistent with large-scale fleet movement. Carter straightened. Alert status. All ships to battle stations. As alarms sounded throughout the human fleet, Carter moved to the viewport. In the distance, small points of green light began to appear, jump signatures of arriving ships. Here they come, he said quietly. Susan heard the alarms from the surface. She rushed to the command center where tactical displays showed what was happening in orbit. Dozens, then hundreds of crack ships were appearing at the edge of the system. Greg whistled softly. That's not a fleet, that's an armada. Susan activated the colony-wide alert system. As sirens wailed across New Haven, she opened a channel to the Retribution. General Carter, ground forces are moving to defensive positions. What are your orders? Carter's voice came through clearly, calm despite the overwhelming force they faced. Stand your ground, Commander. The Behemoths were built for this day. Susan looked up through the transparent roof of the command center. In the sky above, the massive forms of humanity's war machines were turning to face the incoming threat, their weapons powering up, their shields beginning to glow. The battle for human space had begun, and humanity's war behemoths were ready.